Would you join me by taking your Bibles, please? Opening to the book of Judges, chapter 13. In your pew Bible, it is page 213. And follow along as I read. The people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore, be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb. And he shall begin to serve Israel, or he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines." Then the woman came and told her husband, "A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God, very awesome. I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. But he said to me, 'Behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. So then drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death.' Then Manoah prayed to the Lord and said, 'O Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come again to us and teach us what we are to do with the child and who will be born.' And God listened to the voice of Manoah. And the angel of God came again, and the woman again to the woman as she sat in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, 'Behold, the man who came to me the other day has appeared to me.' And Manoah arose and went after his wife and came to the man and said to him, 'Are you the man who spoke to this woman?' And he said, 'I am.' And Manoah said, 'Now, when your words come true, what is this child's manner of life? And what is his mission?' And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, 'Of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat anything that comes from the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink, or eat any unclean thing. All that I command her, let her observe.' Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, 'Please, let us detain you and prepare a young goat for you.' And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, 'If you detain me, I will not eat of your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord.' For Manoah did not know that he was an angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, 'What is your name, so that when your words come true, we may honor you?' And the angel of the Lord said to him, 'Why do you ask my name, since it is wonderful?' So Manoah took a young goat with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, to the one who works wonders. And Manoah and his wife were watching. And when the flame went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord went up in the flame of the altar. Now Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and to his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, "We shall surely die, for we have seen God." But his wife said to him, "If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted the burnt offering and a grain offering offered at our hands, or shown us all these things, or now announced to us such things as these." And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Mahanadan, between Zoar and Eshtaol.
Thanks, Gib. About 6 years ago, I went down to Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, and I took a course on the book of Judges with a professor named Lawson Younger, and I loved the course. So I decided to take this professor's commentary, come back to little old Baraboo, and create a little course on the book of Judges for the Youth Bible Institute. So we did that. We started in on Judges, and we got about to the story of Samson, and then Pastor Dave needed to go in to get his LVAD, that pump that helps sustain his heart for a couple of years. And so I needed to jump out of the course and become the interim senior pastor for a couple months, and I never finished the book of Judges. About 2 years later, I'm now working with adults, and I decided to do the book of Judges as an adult Sunday school class. And so we started moving through Judges, and I got about to the story of Samson. And you see where this is going, don't you? And Pastor Dave needed to go in for his heart transplant. And so I jumped out of the course and became the interim senior pastor for a couple months, and I never finished the book of Judges. Do you know where this is going? For the next 4 weeks, as Pastor Dave is on sabbatical for the month of April, we're going to move through part of the book of Judges, specifically the story of Samson. And I think we're going to be okay, because as we're before, Pastor Dave needed to stay here in order for me to get through Judges. Now he just needs to stay away. I think that'll be an easier thing to accomplish. We'll see, though. Maybe he'll prove me wrong on that. But honestly, it's not just about getting through a book. Samson and the times of Judges are the times of today. They are incredibly relevant, specifically where the book of Judges talks of everyone doing what's right in their own eyes. Are we in that period of time? We're back in it again today. Timeless truths from the book of Judges. I've entitled, you'll notice in your bulletins, a study guide if you want to follow through with that this morning. Don't get halfway through and then wish you had. But I've named the message, No Shortcuts to God's Blessing. No shortcuts to God's blessing. Now, I did not intend that to be a reference to the infamous haircut that Samson gets. Ann Hutchins pointed that out when she was printing. I said, I did not intend for that, but it does work as well. But the idea of no shortcuts to God's blessing really comes from the broader context of the book of Judges. Not just from the life of Samson, although it's there too, but the entire book of Judges. So I would like to spend a little bit of time just talking about Judges in general before we get into specifically the life of Samson. On your study guide there, under 1A, it says 5 things you should know about the book of Judges. And we're going to look at that, but let's get back into the book of Judges. In the 2nd chapter, there's a summary given. We're in luck. You don't have to rely upon me to summarize the book. Judges chapter 2, and I think I'm going to read verses 11 through 19. and we'll see what characterized this period in Israel's history. Judges chapter 2, beginning in verse 11. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. And they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They went after other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were around them and bowed down to them. And they provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord and served the Baals and the Ashtoreth. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers who plundered them. And he sold them into the hand of their surrounding enemies, so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them for harm, as the Lord had warned, and as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were in terrible distress. Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they did not listen to their judges, for they whored after other gods and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their fathers had walked, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord, and they did not do so. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge, and he saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning, because of those who afflicted and oppressed them. But whenever the judge died, they turned back and were more corrupt than their fathers, going after other gods, serving them and bowing down to them. They did not drop any of their practices or their stubborn ways. 5 things we need to know about the book of Judges. Number 1, God's plan through a people seems to be in disarray, or chaos if you prefer. God's plan through a people seems to be in disarray. Okay? God's plan in the Bible is a redemptive plan made available for all peoples, right? But that broad redemptive plan begins in a narrow way. It begins through a man, Abraham, and through his descendants, who are known as the people of Israel. And through Israel and their dealings, we learn a lot about God. We learn about his righteousness, and we learn about the way that he interacts with man. We learn about sin and its effect upon that relationship with God. And eventually there are hints and whispers of the need for God to make things right, for God to fill that gap. And there's sacrifices being offered and hints of this atonement through animal sacrifice that's provided. Well, this relationship between God and his people has been a horrible one. It's horribly one-sided. Ever been in a relationship like that? The people of Israel disobey. From the very start, they just disobey. If you read the book of Numbers, where this relationship really gets started from Mount Sinai on, it's just disobedience after disobedience. Okay? And here in the book of Judges, we have a new form of debilitating disobedience, and it's the cycling of disobedience. Have you ever seen that played out? You can imagine the cycling of betrayal in a relationship. Just has a devastating effect, doesn't it? Okay, the first time you betray your spouse, it hurts, but there's the potential for a second chance. There's a potential for reconciliation, right? Forgiveness to take place. But when it happens again, when there's a new cycle of betrayal, it hurts more, doesn't it? And you begin to have issues of trust. Not sure whether you're going to trust that this will only be a second time of betrayal. And then every time after that, the breakdown of trust just leads to what? Despair, hopelessness, It's worse when it happens again and again, and that's what's happening in the book of Judges. There's this cycling of disobedience, cycling of betrayal against God. Number 3, that was number 2, period of time when God's people cycle in disobedience. Number 3, Israel's disobedience is met by foreign oppression, or as the ESV describes it, plunderers. In their disobedience, they're taking on the other gods, and God's response to that is what? You want it, you got it. You want what they have, well, you're going to become one of them. And he allows these foreign groups, they're different groups each time that come in. All these different groups that are around Israel come in and overtake Israel for a period of time. Israel's disobedience is met by foreign oppression. And then 4, Israel's cries for help are met by divine mercy. Divine mercy, verse 18 of chapter 2 there. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord is with the judge, and he saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning, because of those who afflicted and oppressed them. Isn't that a wonderful picture of God? Even in his justice, even as his anger is issued on his people, and these plunderers are allowed to come in, as they feel the weight of his punishment, God is moved to mercy. Does it remind you of the book of Habakkuk? As God's justice finally comes, and Habakkuk asks for it. When are you going to deal with your people? And once it comes, Habakkuk's prayer in the end there in chapter 3 is, "Oh Lord, in your wrath, remember mercy." In your wrath, remember mercy. I think that's an important thing to cry out for, even as we have that sense of the need for justice, and you want to see God's justice issued in a number of situations, even as it is issued. There ought to be a spirit within us to want to see mercy follow his justice. And that's what happens. And the mercy comes through judges. Okay, these aren't guys in black robes with funny old wigs. All right? These are deliverers that God is sending. Number 5. Judges in this context are deliverers raised up by God to provide Israel rescue and rest. They're deliverers to provide rescue and rest. So the most immediate concern is rescue. They want to be set free. And then the rest is this ongoing rescue, this ongoing safety and security in God's blessing. So they pray for that. God's deliverance comes through these judges. Okay? So the lessons to be learned of Judges, probably among others, but I kind of encapsulated in the title for this message, there are no shortcuts to God's blessings. Okay? They're trying to find God's blessing in the promised land, right? They've come into the place of God's rest, the place of his deliverance and blessing. They come there and they seek it not only in turning to God in obedience, but by looking to the other peoples, but by looking to the other ways, by taking on other gods, and they look away from the Lord in obedience. They should have stuck with the sure way to trust the Lord and to obey him. Isn't that true of today? Don't we separate faith from obedience? Isn't it tempting to do that? I think the world does that. They're embracing of faith. Faith is good, but obedience we don't desire, right? They don't want to obey the Lord. They'll speak of believing in the Lord, but they don't want to obey him. When you separate faith from obedience, Faith leads to God's blessing, and they take out obedience and try to make a shortcut straight from faith right into God's blessing. You can't separate faith from obedience. In fact, in Romans 1, verse 6, I like it where it talks about, Romans 1, 6, talks about the obedience of faith. Faith gives birth to obedience. It's a byproduct of faith, obedience. You walk in the Lord. I have found again and again as you interact with people in the world, they will speak of faith, but they have no interest in obeying the Lord. This is played out perhaps most vividly in my ministry, and I've shared this example in other contexts as well, but many times when I receive requests to do weddings, they're from couples outside of the church. A number of them are from within the church, but a lot of times they're people from outside of the church. And almost all the time, not always, but almost all the times, the couples are not walking with the Lord. They don't really have an interest in His ways. They have no desire to obey Him. They have no special regard for this book. And the question that begs to be asked is, why are you coming to me? Why are you wanting to get married in a church? And it's actually kind of a nice way to transition for them. Why? Well, tell me, why are you wanting to get married in a church? Why don't you just go to a justice of the peace? And they're kind of stumped. They're trying to think, well, I guess I've always envisioned it. Isn't that where people get married, is in churches? And then you kind of play this out. They want a church, they want a pastor, and they want sacred language. They want God talk in the wedding. There's something about the environment for a marriage ceremony that seems right to them. But I try to steer them to a better answer. I say, I'm guessing you want God's blessing on your marriage, right? Carol's right with me. You want God's blessing on your marriage, right? Oh, well, yeah, we want God's blessing on our marriage. Yeah, we want to get married in a church. We want to get married before God, and it just all kind of makes sense. And then I have the very challenging issue of telling them there are no shortcuts to God's blessing. You don't get married in a church building with a pastor guy up there talking about God and love and quoting the Bible, and because you got married there, you're going to be blessed. That's a shortcut. What's the way to blessing? It's through obedience. So then I propose that as plan B, maybe a better way, right? Let's try another way to get God's blessing. Let's talk about getting your lives and your relationship right before the Lord. They're almost always sleeping together, and now they're almost always living together. And we get to talk about how can you make this relationship right before the Lord. And to be honest, are most of them interested in doing that? Some are. Some are. That's the good news. But many are you kidding me? We don't want God's blessing that much. We'll find another church and another pastor who will give us the shortcut to God's blessing. Well, that's the idea here of the book of Judges. This is the broader context. There are no shortcuts to God's blessing. Let's look at chapter 13 here a little bit. And who is this Samson character? You know what's really nice? I can tell we're not going to get through the message today, but I don't have to, do I? Because I'm doing a whole series, and I can take my time. Pastor Dave has it good. Usually I have to jump in and get it all in, okay? All right, who is this Samson? How many of you have heard of the biblical character Samson? Okay, most of you. I want to take kind of a poll here on what you think of Samson. You could describe him in a couple different ways. But some would describe him maybe as a sincere man of God who carelessly gets duped by a seductress. Okay? He's a sincere man of God who carelessly gets duped by a seductress. Okay? There's something certainly true to that. Or would you describe him as a brazen, lawless man with little regard for the people or purposes of God. Okay? For those of you who know a little bit about Samson, which would you say kind of fits him better? Raise your hand. Would you describe him as a brazen, lawless man with little regard for the people or purposes of God? Okay. A few of you. How about a sincere man of God who carelessly gets duped by a seductress? Okay, maybe twice as much, but most of you did not vote. Even though many of us knew about Samson. You were worried about being wrong, weren't you? We'll kind of look at Samson and see what we think fits him. I think the interpretive key that's really necessary for understanding the story of Samson is a matter of divine irony. And I wrote that down as Roman number 2, and then letter A, divine irony. We have irony here. Now, what's irony in this story that Gib was reading for us? Irony is the story of an unsinkable ship that not only sinks, but it sinks on its maiden voyage, right? The story of the Titanic is tragic, but it's an example of irony, right? How about at a ceremony celebrating the rehabilitation of seals after the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska, at an average cost of $80,000 per seal, 2 seals released back into the wild only to be eaten within a minute by a killer whale. Now, that didn't happen. I had to look that one up. But that one floated around on the web. Even though it's not true, it's a story, right, of irony. Okay, maybe a little closer to home. A team goes 15-1 and then loses in the first round of the playoffs. Okay, that one was a little close to home. Some of you very have. Just this week, I was playing basketball with my son and with a neighbor boy, and we were playing the game of lightning. You don't need to know what that is, but we were playing, and we were each winning, and I was losing plenty. They make me shoot with my left hand, which makes it a lot harder for me. But we were playing, and I just happened to note, and I was just kind of rubbing it into these guys, that even though we all are winning some of the time, we played about 15 rounds, and I've never gotten out first. Irony would be the next round, who gets out first? And irony would be my son pointing that out to me. Now, who said that they hadn't gotten out the first round? Irony is kind of fun to point out when you can see it. I looked it up, and a definition says it's when there's an incongruity. I love that word. Isn't that cool? Incongruity between the actual result of a sequence of events and the normal or expected result. Okay? It's when you're kind of led to expect one thing and you get the exact opposite. That's going to be really important as we understand the account of Samson. Okay? The Bible is filled with irony. All right? The book of Judges has an overwhelming amount of irony, but the story of Samson is a fantastic example of irony being set up and played out. So be there, okay? In order for it to be irony, you have to have a build-up. There are signs in Judges 13 of something big. There are signs of something big. That's B. Okay? Let's look at a few things that are really big in the story of Samson. First of all, there's an angelic birth announcement. Okay? There's an angelic birth announcement given. So we're back in Judges chapter 13 now. Verse 3, and the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, behold, you are barren, and so forth. Okay, and then verse 9, and God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman. All right, there's an angelic birth announcement. This does not happen for most babies that are to be born, right? Can you think of one in the Old Testament that it did happen? Isaac, right? Yeah. The giving of this birth announcement, angelic birth announcement to Isaac. And there are others in the Bible that receive them, but this is the biggest. I mean, Sarah and Abraham. they're told ahead of time by an angel they're going to have a child. And that kind of an announcement would bring to mind that there is going to be a special birth, a special boy here. Okay? Number 2, it's a barren mother-to-be. A barren mother-to-be. Again, the heroic mothers of Israel oftentimes were barren, weren't they? They had trouble conceiving. They weren't able to conceive. Sarah, in trying to have Isaac, Rebekah, and having Jacob and Esau, Rachel, in having Joseph, and then Benjamin, Hannah, in having Samuel, and then in the New Testament, Elizabeth. I mean, this is kind of a theme. When someone is barren, unable to have a child, and then God opens their womb, you're expecting something big. Okay? I think I'm going to do Pastor Dave's conclusion to a ceremony. I love that when he does that. It's like, could give a conclusion or the big squint and end. I think we're going to have to do that. We're out of time. Okay? We'll pick up with Samson and more of the story. We'll find out what's so big and exciting about Samson, and then be prepared for a Titanic-like smash into an iceberg. Okay? And the ship is going to sink, and we're going to have lots to learn about Samson and his story. Let's close our time in prayer. Lord, if anything is learned from today's look at the book of Judges, I pray that each one wouldn't just look with scorn at a world that forsakes obedience to God. But Lord, I pray that we'd look at our own lives. Is there some way, even today, that you could prick our conscience to see an area of our life that we are not in full obedience? Lord, I pray that we would live out a faith that conveys obedience and trust and lordship, understanding who you are and who we need to be before you. And then, Lord, I pray a blessing over this people. I'm not talking about getting stuff, or getting our health back, although those are certainly blessings. Those are huge blessings. But Lord, I'm talking about rest. I'm talking about a peace that surpasses understanding, a joy that can be in us in good times and in tough times. And I pray for a strength to endure every trial and to resist temptations. Lord, that's the kind of blessing we're looking for. Would you grant that to these people as they seek to obey you? I pray this blessing over each one in Jesus' name. Amen.